This is WWE superstar Drew McIntyre, and you're listening to the WWE Podcast.
The champ is
the one that everybody wants, me.
It's going to WrestleMania. Claymore!
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass. This is my iron. You're going to acknowledge me.
Welcome, everybody, to the current state of WWE. Anthony DeMarco is with me to talk about what is going on right now, and we're going to cover two topics tonight as LA Knight seems to be at the forefront of a lot of people's minds right now as he is chasing the United States title and chasing Austin Theory, and is a couple of matches away from that happening, but we'll talk about that. And then, guys, we're going to talk about The Rock because he was mentioned by Cameron Grimes. And we'll get into that and what that could mean or could not mean. But first, Anthony, welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
Not too bad, buddy. And I guess we'll start with LA Knight and something that, you know, we've been talking about for a few weeks. I think other people have been talking about it for a few weeks, and somewhat predictable of him setting his sights on Austin Theory and the United States Championship. But as you always say, predictability isn't always the bad thing. And I think this is an instance where the trajectory of LA Knight eventually winding up on the same path as Austin Theory to the U.S. title is something that I believe should happen, needed to happen, and I think eventually will come to fruition, presumably by SummerSlam.
That seems to be the general consensus, and we're not really going to be breaking any news here when we say that it's likely that LA Knight wins his Fatal 4-Way next week and then goes on to face Santos Escobar, and that person will be facing LA Knight or facing Austin Theory, presumably at SummerSlam. And I do think ultimately that probably is the case. However, do you think that there's any chance that since things are going so well for LA Knight, you look back at the loss at Money in the Bank that so many people were upset about? Do you think there's any chance, given that, I mean, even at a loss, people are getting more and more support for him, that WWE says, well, you know, hey, maybe we aren't going to give him the U.S. title. Maybe we're going to take a different path and, continue to make it look like we're not pushing him. And by not pushing him, the fans are going to continue to do what they've been doing and continue to support him more and more. And he's going viral and viral. And do you think there's any chance they do this, or are they just going to finally pull the trigger and act just, give him the United States Championship and then move on?
I think they pull the trigger because this organic support has been building for LA Knight since the winter time, the early winter when he was feuding with Bray Wyatt. That feels like eons ago right now, but really caught steam, I would say, around WrestleMania time when he was left off the card. So we've been looking at, like 4 or 5 months of LA Knight really having like a tough time in terms of wins and losses and prominent matches and such, and a big loss rather, and much to the dismay of the live crowd in London at the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. But I think that while WWE, in my opinion, and I believe that you feel the same way, has done a really good job here, slow playing this, letting the crowd want LA Knight even more than they already do through all these losses, and maybe being held off of television at times when you would think he'd be on, I do think eventually you have to give back a bit. And there may be too much of a good thing if they just continue to keep LA Knight down in hopes that the fans will just organically continue to support him. Because, 4 or 5 months, that's a long time. And by the time you get to SummerSlam, you'll be at the end of the summer pretty much, when this started back in the winter. And I don't think giving him the United States Championship is that monumental of a victory for him. And at the same time, I really think the United States Championship needs a fresh coat of paint. And that's no slight against Austin Theory. I just think that his current run with the U.S. title, that I believe he's been on a run since he's held this title since Survivor Series of last year. I believe that was when he won it from Seth Rollins in the triple threat match along with Bobby Lashley. So I think it's gotten really stale, as you mentioned a lot already, that, ever since the WrestleMania match against John Cena, Theory has kind of felt directionless. So not only for LA Knight, Knight to kind of get that victory and throw the fans a bone a bit, I do also think that the United States Championship needs a fresh coat of paint, and who better than the hottest superstar on the roster right now in LA Knight?
This is going to be one of the most just crazy success stories if it does end up being a sustainable support for LA Knight. When you think about it, I mean, it literally has just come out of absolutely nowhere. This was not in the plans that I was aware of in any capacity from WWE management. This is something that they can no longer ignore, and they're not ignoring it. But to answer my own question, I would agree, while there is a case that you could make of, well, things are going so well by us not looking like we're pushing him, he's continuing to be elevated. That's not a long-term sustainable approach to pushing LA Knight. That's kind of a, things are working, things are moving, eventually we do have to get behind him. You know, that's a nice kind of reverse psychology thing to do for a little while, but eventually you got to either, you know, crap or get off the pot, right? Like you got to pull the trigger. And I think that's what they do here. This, as you said, it's not the most important title. It's not the most prestigious title. It's not the one Roman Reigns is holding. But right now, Roman Reigns is wrapped up in other stuff, and we'll get to that side of things in a moment too, with the you know, potentially massive opponent that was hinted on TV this week. But I think that, yeah, it's LA Knight's time. I honestly, if I was to guess, he wins it at SummerSlam. Totally fine with that, and he probably holds on to it maybe to the Rumble, and then you know, depending on what's going on with Roman, I guess you know, really pushing this out, is LA Knight to you, even in the best case scenario, a true candidate to possibly challenge and or dethrone Roman Reigns for his championship?
I don't want to say that he's too old, but I feel like maybe that might be holding him back. He's what, 40, 41 years old?
Yeah.
I hate to say that, because I think Batista was like, what, 35 when he got pushed to the moon post Evolution at WrestleMania 21. So, I mean, we've seen this before, although that is a 5-year difference, which could mean the world in wrestling years and just professional sports in general. But I'm not sure if he's the guy, because the guy that defeats Roman Reigns has to be someone that is looked at as the future of the company and someone you could build around moving forward. That will arguably be the most significant championship victory in the history of the company. And that's saying something, but you could really make that case. Whoever defeats Roman Reigns for the Undisputed Championship will arguably have the most successful, or most significant rather, championship victory in the history of even professional wrestling to date. I don't know if LA Knight is that guy. I think he's really hot right now. I think he's super over right now. I think he has a world championship victory in him sometime between now and the end of his career. I just don't know if LA Knight is that guy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, his age doesn't help. As you mentioned, that span between 35 and 40, man, that's a huge difference in any sport. Injuries start to happen. You do start to look like you're getting older. Something happens between 35 and 40. I can attest. There's just something that does. I mean, and I can imagine it's exponential in sports when your body naturally starts to break down. It's just life. But yeah, I would agree. He's probably not the guy, but that said, he could have a fun program with Roman, and whoever is the person that does defeat Roman, I don't know if the expectation can be lived up to at this point. I mean, like you said, it should be something monumental. It should be somebody that's perfect, that checks every single box on that list. And honestly, I don't know if at this point, after 3 years of Roman being champion and wondering, oh my God, who could that be? That moment of Roman losing is going to be the biggest moment in that person's career. My point is, I don't know if that any moment that they're envisioning for Roman losing his belt in can live up to the expectation. I mean, as the weeks and months and now years tick by, we as a fan base and a company, almost getting to a point where it's an unrealistic expectation to imagine whoever this person is in Fantasyland to be the second coming of Austin or Bret Hart or Rock or Andre. Like, it's probably not going to happen. Those are special talent, and the ones that come along once every 40 to 50 years, like that's a very difficult and tall order to ask. So whoever this person is that does defeat Roman, and again, I'm with you, bringing it back. I don't think it's LA Knight. They have to just look at the person and go, how many, like whoever fills the most boxes. It doesn't have to be every box because that's unrealistic, but whoever fills the most check boxes is probably going to be that person whenever they're ready to finally have him drop it.
And I don't know if that person's on the roster. Like, obviously, you could look at someone like Braun Breaker, who's in NXT right now. And, full disclosure, I watched zero NXT ever, so I can't really speak to Braun Breaker. Solo Sikoa, like, I mean, maybe, but I don't know if he has star, like, written on him. Like, I'm not sure if Solo Sikoa will ever be that big of a main event player. I mean, Austin Theory, I mean, he's probably the only guy on the roster right now that probably checks all the boxes and is kind of like a prototype of what you'd want. But you would have to do a lot with Austin Theory in turning him into a baby face and getting that organic support behind him. And I guess also Gunther, but I mean, a lot of the same could be said about Gunther, about what I just said about Austin Theory. Like, in terms of dethroning Roman Reigns, like, first of all, do you agree with Theory and or Gunther maybe being those guys?
They check a lot of boxes. I mean, I would imagine maybe we're on the same page here. I think Gunther should be the one to do it. I really do. Yeah, I totally understand. I get he's a heel. I understand that, but you could do some work over the next several months, and you could eventually turn the guy babyface. I mean, or you keep him heel and a babyface Roman. I mean, there's ways to do it. I think you could turn Gunther babyface if the time was right, but he's got so many of the attributes you're looking for in a guy. He's relatively young. God dang, he looks the part. He's a decent promo. He's got a decent group around him. He's got a lot of intangibles. He's got that X factor. I mean, right now, if I was to pick one person on the roster, even above Seth Rollins or Austin Theory or Braun Breaker, it would be Gunther to me.
And, this is just purely fantasy booking, which I rarely do. But the way that I figured that it would happen would be Gunther squashing Roman, like in a Brock, John Cena-esque fashion of SummerSlam 2014, which would take Roman off of TV and bring him back as a babyface. And I don't like to go too down this rabbit hole with fantasy booking, but that's a way that you would do it? Like, how, like, if Gunther was the guy, how would you go about putting the strap on him?
Yeah, boy. When you mentioned 2014, I'm thinking, has it really been that long since that squash match happened? Is it really? I mean, like, maybe. My God, nearly 10 years of I'll take your word for it. But nonetheless, yeah, it should be something shocking. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't put so much stock on who ends Roman Reigns' streak as much as I would Roman Reigns' streak. To me, what they're doing, the documentaries they're creating, and the merchandise they're selling, and the TV ratings that are happening right now, to me, if I was the company, I'd be like, look, that is more important and lucrative, and eventually you can create so many things out of that off of this run that's historic that we may in our lifetimes never see again, rather than just a singular moment of, well, wait, who was the one to beat him? You look back at The Undertaker and his streak. We all remember when it ended, but we look back and go, yeah, it probably shouldn't have ended. That was a big moment. But you look back at the body of work of The Undertaker when he went 21-0, and that is, to me, more important than what I think about rather than Brock beating Undertaker. So, again, a little different of a scenario, but yeah, so.
Yeah, and so unfortunately I don't see that as we kind of come full circle back to LA Knight. I don't see him being that guy. But that being said, I certainly see him being a main event player for one of the world titles somewhere down the line. Or maybe he goes to Raw and he contends for the world heavyweight, or stays on SmackDown and contends for the WWE Championship once it's off of Roman Reigns. I just don't think he's that level of a competitor.
Right, and I'm with you. I think too, to kind of wrap this and move to our next topic, which is interesting to me, very interesting, is that I think honestly the fans are going to be the ones to really make the decision to some degree, and of course they always say, oh, the fans make the decisions to an extent. Like there's a lot of times they shove stuff down our throat that we just kind of regurgitate and they shove it back in anyway. I mean, look what they did with Roman Reigns as a babyface, the big dog character that was just, I mean, at times unbelievably insufferable. There's been John Cena never turning heel. Like there's a lot of things they did that even though the fans wanted, they didn't do because they thought they knew better. But generally we have a decent say in what happens. And if we're looking for LA Knight to possibly be in the conversation for that Roman Reigns beating Roman Reigns for the title, we got to be consistent about the crowd reactions. If you make them undeniable, if you just constantly elevate the reactions for them, WWE may be forced to eventually just say, you know what, this seems to be our guy. Let's strike while it's hot. I know he's older, but this will be a hell of a moment. And so, yeah, any final thoughts on LA Knight before we move to Mr. Dwayne?
Yeah, all I would say is that I do think they have to give something back with LA Knight before the summer ends. Like, I like the slow play, and I know I kind of open with this. I just really think that they have to give the fans something, throw them a bone of sorts, and I think the U.S. title could also use LA Knight. Yeah,
definitely. I'm with you, and I think fans will be happy. At least it'll quiet them for the time being. So, all right, let's get to another segment here, and I went over this on my review here, weekend review, but we had a Grayson Waller interview, and he went through his interview and talked about The Rock. As we knew, there was a Twitter exchange between The Rock and Grayson Waller, and some funny insults by The Rock, saying that he looked like he fell out of a balloon knot, which is really funny. Just the visual of it, we all know what a balloon knot looks like. So, that to me, I was like, okay, well, The Rock's just, he interacts occasionally with wrestlers, no big deal. But then it was brought on to the screen. It was brought on by Grayson Waller talking about The Rock and how he's not paying attention. He's not even seemingly caring about his family imploding. And I go, oh, whoa, that caught my attention. And, saying that, if you smell what Waller's cooking or something, like he just knocked off The Rock's line. And I'm like, all right, they brought this on air. He mentioned the Bloodline and The Rock in the same sentence on air. Is this just one of the things he's using? Is Grayson Waller just using The Rock's interaction on Twitter to make himself feel more important? Or do you think that this is actually the very beginnings of The Rock coming back to eventually confront Roman and the Bloodline? Where do you think, what was the purpose of this in your mind?
Here's the thing. Survivor Series 2021, the whole event, or was it 2020? 2021?
The Golden Egg?
Yes.
God.
Yes. Whatever that was, I believe it was 2020, actually. Look, I don't remember. Whatever it was, the Golden Egg, you're right. Yeah. I could not believe that they brought the Golden Egg. Literally, Vince McMahon mentioned The Rock by name while speaking to Roman Reigns, referring to the fact that they're cousins, and there was no payoff. So I'm going to continue to be pessimistic and expect the worst here, and my expectation is The Rock not to come back. That being said, if between now and WrestleMania 40, we do not see The Rock, and I've gone on this tirade before and this diatribe and whatever you want to call it, but if we don't see The Rock, it will be an overt slap in the face by him to the fans. By someone who's always said this is where he grew up, this was his first love, he'll always be in the WWE family, blah, 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 blah. I'm never, ever going away, a crock of you-know-what. It would take a lot of balls for him not to show up now, honestly, because it has been tease after tease after tease since the last time we saw him on WWE programming, which was October of 2019, the SmackDown debut on Fox. So I'm going to continue to be pessimistic just because that's what I've been conditioned to be. But at the same time, is that what they've been trying to do for the last 3.5, 4 years? Is condition us to think that he is never, ever, ever going to actually step foot in a WWE ring again. So there's a part of me that isn't going to believe it until I see it. And as you've kind of referred to him as, who must not be named. But at the same time, I'm just like, eventually they have to bring him back, right?
This is a topic I'm like, we have been literally talking about this for 3 years. I mean, and honestly, at this point, if the match happened, it's at an unfair standard of expectation now. I mean, it's just, do I think this is going to happen though? Do I think this ultimately, do I think these are the seeds of a Rock return? If someone said point blank, put me on the spot, do I think it is? I think it is. And the reason I think it is as we've mentioned many times before, we keep saying, oh, it's got to be it. This has got to be it. This is really it. You've had the run of the Bloodline as heels. Roman is healthy. It's WrestleMania 40. It's Philadelphia. The history of Rock and Roman there. The family is in shambles. Roman Reigns is claimed to be the head of the table. Alpha and Sika have been mentioned many times. The family. Everything here is, you're not going to get everything lining up like this again. You cannot extend this another year. Everyone's going to be a year older. Roman's probably going to be babyface this time next year. Maybe there's a reunion of the Bloodline. They turn the whole faction babyface, and then they're on a massive babyface run. Like, this is it. It's a nice round number. I'm going to take the optimistic road of that this was. And I'm probably, I might be wrong. I'm not saying I'm 100% right, but everything seems to be pointing that way. The Rock was supposed to be at 39. He canceled because of his schedule. We've heard that a million times, and I'm tired of hearing of it, but apparently that's true. This is it. And you're right. This is going to be a slap in the face to fans, a slap in the face to the company, really a slap in the face to Roman, if he won't ever admit that, but it kind of is. I mean, so we're only asking for one match. I know the preparation for just getting into one match, it sounds super easy to do, and I totally am respectful of the fact that it takes many months to get yourself into ring shape, even if it's just for one match. My God, look at The Undertaker and what he had to do to get himself ready for a single match a year. So do I think it is? I do, because it's also the first time that they've mentioned The Rock and the Bloodline on television in quite some time, and the fact that his family's imploding, and the fact that Grayson Waller is a talk show host where he could eventually actually have The Rock agree to come on, and that's where things start to really get planted that The Rock and Roman could eventually square off. So I think it's eventually going to lead to The Rock on the Grayson Waller effect. When is that happening? I don't know, but I'll be the optimistic one.
But I got to ask you, what has changed for you? And this isn't me like trying to like blow up like your positivity balloon, but it's like, you were saying that you had sworn him off. You were never going to be this optimistic again. But do you think this is enough of a seed for you to go back into the positivity aisle? And I'm not asking this, I'm not saying this to be like a jerk. I'm saying it because I want to be swayed in that aisle too. He's my favorite wrestler of all time. It's just, I'm still like, yeah, you fooled me enough times. Like, I'm genuinely asking you, because I'm sure a lot of other people are asking the same thing, is just like, how can I be swayed to have the same feeling?
Okay, so a couple things are going on here. Number one, I'm trying to present the argument on the other side. Not that I don't believe my own stuff. I do. I'm still on the side of more optimistic than not. But I'm also trying to give fans that are maybe on this side a little bit of hope, or those that are not, maybe a little bit of hope. I'm not trying to smash anyone's dreams. And I'm also not riding this fantasy rainbow wave that, oh my God, he's back, it's happening. Like, like the Michael Scott, those in The Office, that The Office, like, it's happening. Oh, right. No. I'm leaning optimistic. I'm like just leaning like 51-49 that that's how close I am. So I'm not, in this fantasy land of believing, oh my God, this is it. But again, this to me, what has changed is the fact that they've mentioned this publicly on television, and for all the reasons I mentioned before about the evidence of how this could happen and why it could happen and why it should happen. And I swore him off only to the point where he wasn't mentioned. I did my best, unless people asked me directly about The Rock, to not bring it up out of nowhere. And now that he's been in my face, I think that the door is open for me to now talk about it. If we go another few months and he's not mentioned again, I'm not going to mention him. But if he's mentioned on WWE television in the same sentence as the Bloodline and talking about the family implosion, I mean, that's something you can sink your teeth into, and it also takes me out of swearing him off because WWE opened the door. I didn't. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Okay. No, that's fair. So for me, this is my thing. And this is the reason why I'm kind of leaning into the positive side as I hear you speak. I fear, and this is hard to say because you know how big of a Rock fan I am. If people listen to my podcast, up like 50% of the shows I do involve The Rock in some form or fashion because of how much content of his I've consumed when I was younger in the Ruthless Aggression era, really early Ruthless Aggression era and Attitude era. I fear that if he doesn't actually come back here, not to say that like he would be affected by it, because if he just never shows on TV again, like he will never feel it, maybe on social media, but like it's almost like we're trending into irreparable damage and irreparable trust if he doesn't do it. Like not his entire legacy. Everyone will always appreciate what he did for the company between, let's say, 98 and 2003. And then when he came back in 2011 to 2013, he will always go down as one of the best wrestlers in the history of professional wrestling, one of the most over wrestlers in the history of the business. But in my opinion, as a longtime wrestling fan, almost 25 years, as a major Rock fan, I fear that we are trending into a, point of no return here, not just for his story with the Bloodline, but in terms of how fans will maybe feel about him. And, the whole saying of, what have you done for me lately? Well, he hasn't done a whole lot for wrestling fans lately. And to be honest, he hasn't done a whole lot for them in, coming up on 7-8 years. I mean, the last thing we ever saw him really do is, I'm not even going to count the Baron Corbin thing. And if you don't count the Baron Corbin thing at SmackDown's premiere on Fox, you probably have to go back to WrestleMania 32 with Bray Wyatt. And even at that, you're really stretching it. So I don't know. Do you feel that The Rock may be risking losing the trust of fans permanently if he doesn't come back between now and WrestleMania 40?
A little bit, and the thing is, though, there's been so much time between the fans of this generation and ours that, I mean, I understand that he had his match with John Cena. What was that, WrestleMania 27, whatever it was, and then WrestleMania 28. 28-29. So, I mean, that's still
10 years ago.
Yeah, and before that, he wasn't in WWE since 2004. So, like, there's been quite a long time, 20 years, really, since he's been active full-time. So there's a big gap there of the fans that are in their 30s and 40s now, of our generation maybe being a little affected and annoyed by it. But ultimately, if he ignores this, we don't hear from him, all of a sudden in 2 years, in 2025, he just randomly shows up on Monday Night Raw and rock bottom to the top heel, people are going to pop. People are going to lose it and forget all about this. They're going to say, oh, man, that would have been awesome. But The Rock's here now, and look what he did. Like, people are in a very much in a now, what are you doing for me right now, kind of mode. And it's, I think, not for the better in our life right now, but it is what it is. So I think that, sure, people will be pissed off, and maybe give Dwayne some flack on social media, and then they'll go about their day, and The Rock's going to sit there and, and count his money and go, okay, cool. Like, I mean, he loves wrestling. I do believe that, but he has clearly moved on from it, and he doesn't owe us anything, really, when you think about it. However, this is one that I think he does. And I know that that's kind of a selfish thing to say as a fan, but here's the thing. He has been teasing it for a while. TV shows he's teased it. It's been teased for 3 years. The Rock has now been mentioned on TV this past week in the same sentence as the Bloodline. And there has never been a more personal storyline for The Rock to be a part of. He's been involved in some great storylines. I mean, some really good ones, obviously with Austin and Triple H and Undertaker. I mean, you go down the list, Brock Lesnar. And he has not been involved in something as personal as this that has to do with his immediate family and his cousins and someone claiming that they are the head of their entire family and bringing in, his cousins and bringing in his dad and bringing in, talking about the heritage of the family. This is one he kind of owes. It sounds selfish, guys, I know, but he kind of owes the fans this one after so much teasing and the fact that this is such a personal, perfect storyline that, hey, Dwayne, we are all going to pour money into your wallet to see this. So that's how I feel.
And I do agree. The teasing has been brutal. Like, wasn't there some interview he did 10 months ago where someone said, who's the head of the table? And he was just like, I'm the head of the table. And he said it jokingly, but he knows what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. Having the egg sponsor Survivor Series, whatever year that was, it's, and he must know that this is arguably the best story wrestling has ever produced. In what's a comparable story to what we're seeing now? Storytelling wise, the thing that off the top of my head most recently is probably Batista's babyface turn on Triple H. And even at that was what? A 4-month-long build? Excellent storytelling, brilliantly executed. But this has been going on for 3 years. And it involves arguably the most historic wrestling family in the history of the business. And one that has direct ties to arguably the best of all time, or certainly one of the best of all time in The Rock, one of the biggest stars in the world, forget wrestling, but in the world. So I don't think it's selfish to say that, he may owe us on this in some form or fashion. He may owe us here. He may just have to say to his agents or the movie studios or his XFL compatriots, look, I need to go back and do this. And you know what? If The Rock committed to this, let's say he wanted to commit between now and WrestleMania, how many dates would he really need to commit? 10? Pardon me. If he really wanted to build this story, I don't think you need more than 10 dates, because as soon as The Rock's music hits, you know why he's there. The story is already told. He just has to come in and kind of be present, show that, yes, this is actually happening, and kind of guide it along. Dude, how many dates would The Rock realistically have to give WWE between now and WrestleMania to get people's interest peaked, if we're being honest here?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, the fact that The Rock wouldn't be The Rock, he wouldn't be having the success he's having without the wrestling fans who made him what he is. So I guess we could lean on that as, kind of a emotional blackmail, if you will, for Dwayne that, hey, you at least owe us this, not because just of the teasing and the 3 years of anticipation and you're doing it, you're not doing it. Oh, wait, I got a commitment. Oh, sorry, guys, can't do it. And all that stuff. Hey, you wouldn't be where you are if it weren't for us. I don't mean to pull out that card, but for this one, I would pull out that emotional blackmail card. I would be that guy for this match. I would. However, yeah, with this whole thing with The Rock and with Roman Reigns, I think that you have a matchup that not only, as you said, he is the biggest star in the world. I mean, he just is. He's the biggest star in Hollywood. He's the biggest star, one of the biggest stars in wrestling. This is something that just needs to happen, and I just don't see a way out of it for Dwayne. Like you said, he could just say to everybody, look, this is something that needs to be done. And to me, there's a part of him I know, not that I know him on a personal level, but how can he not want to do this? How can he not make this a priority to kind of cap off his career. And, maybe this is his final match. Maybe it's not. I don't know. There was a second point you made. I can't remember. What were you saying on the back end of your comments?
That how many dates would he realistically have to set aside?
Yeah, the dates. So you're right. So between SummerSlam and Mania, I think 10 is fine. Now people will get annoyed with that and say, "Oh man, the build." Look, we dealt with that for John Cena and The Rock, and it worked just fine. And honestly, John Cena had a lot of content to work with the whole via satellite stuff. So I could do without the via satellite stuff. He may do that once or twice. But honestly, yeah, I would say 10 physical dates, like you're in person, like he's there. I would think 10 is just fine because that's a long time to build. Like August to April, what was that, like 6 months? I
think it's 6 or 7.
Yeah, so like that's half a year. That's a long time to build something. So I think that is more than adequate. You spread those 10 dates over 6-7 months. That's a little less than or a little more than one date per month. That's doable. Totally. I mean, hell, we're dealing with that right now with Roman Reigns as a current champion. So like, honestly, 10 dates over 7 months is kind of the status quo, or even maybe a little more than what Roman's doing. So I really have no problem with that at all. I think that would work just fine. We could easily work with that as fans. I think I'm speaking on behalf of just myself, but I'd be okay with that.
And because how much of a story really needs to be told here? Like, we know why he's back. We know who he's going to end up fighting. We know the family history with Roman Reigns and the Usos and Solo and all that. Like, those 10 dates I would say probably 4 of them would be reserved. Well, 5 of them would probably be reserved in the month building up to WrestleMania, like all the SmackDowns leading up to, let's say 4 and then 5. And then besides that, you could probably do once a month where The Rock shows up, has some promo or face-to-face with Paul Heyman, maybe an encounter with the Usos, of maybe you bring back Rikishi. Why not bring back the whole family? Like him and Rikishi have a storied history. I believe they had that match at Survivor Series 2000s. I did it for The Rock.
Oh, God, yeah.
You could do a lot with 10 dates just because there's not that much of a story that needs to be told. There isn't. It's kind of like when Shane McMahon came back, and I've said so many times on this podcast, like, it makes no sense to me how they never did him versus Triple H, because the story writes itself. You could just put them in a ring together and people are like, yep, I know why this is happening. This is the same thing on steroids between Rock and Roman, because guys like you and me, other podcasts, fans, whoever have fantasy booked Rock and Roman in so many different ways now that I just don't think anyone would really care, if you know what I mean. Like, you could probably have them not even face each other until they're in the ring at WrestleMania, and people would still go ballistic. There's just so, like, at least with John Cena and The Rock, like, you had to give somewhat more dates because we had to see the animosity. Like, we knew that there was like an online thing, but you still had to tell a story between The Rock and John Cena. The story's already been told with Rock and Roman Reigns. Like, it really has in a lot of ways. You just have to make it come to life by being present. And I think that 10 dates max would do it. And that's why I think, furthering your point, is that he kind of owes us this, because we're not asking him to do like what he did from Rumble 2013 to Mania 2013, where there's that 2-3 month stretch where he was there every Monday Night Raw and even a couple of SmackDowns, and he was holding the title. We don't need that from him now. We just need him to be present for 10 dates max and just have this dream match and probably close to the culmination of arguably the best story that pro wrestling has ever told come to life.
Yeah, this is a creative team's wet dream. Like, I mean, there's, like you said, how many storylines do you have to just show up and it works? Almost none. And, you asked earlier, what's a comparable storyline that we've seen even over the last 10, 20 years? The only one I can think of that is this good, especially when it deals with family, maybe Kane and Undertaker. I mean, that storyline of them being brothers and the back and forth and Undertaker refusing to fight him, like that to me, while it's not the same story, it was, to me, one of the best stories ever told in pro wrestling. I mean, we're going back like 25 years, I know, but so to me that's comparable. But yeah, this is a rare story in which you just literally show up and it works. You don't really need to cut promos for The Rock. You know where you're going. Same with Roman, who's come a long way with promos. Paul Heyman's there as support. Solo, if he's still there, could take a rock bottom or two. And like you said, if he shows up on Raw, there's only so much you can say in promos. I mean, every single of these mythical 10 appearances wouldn't just be promo against Roman. You can have The Rock show up. Roman's not there that week. Somebody comes out, interrupts The Rock. He's talking about the Bloodline, rock bottom. Like, it's just kind of, keep the fans happy. The Rock's there, or one of his cronies is there, but Roman's not there. And you get a rock bottom or a people's elbow and a decent promo, and then the following week Roman's there. You could easily make this work. So yeah, I mean, again, I have zero shame or zero F's to give about pulling out the card of "you owe me." I very rarely say that. That sounds like such a D thing to say, and in some ways it is, but in other respects, it's there's times in life when it's worth the price of putting your shame, or just accepting the shame that's going to come your way, and I'm all for it. Come at me, it's fine. But ultimately, guys, do I think this is going to happen? I'd give it 50-50, and that's better than I would have given it a few months ago. And again, I'm leaning 51. I would say this is the seedlings of a Rock return. That's where I'm leaning, and I'll stick by my guns, and I won't mention The Rock until he's brought up again on TV. I'm going to stick by that too. So, do you have any thoughts in closing here about The Rock and ultimately where this where you think this ultimately is going?
It has to be The Rock. I keep saying, it just has to be. This is what I'll say, because I don't want to go down another rant, because anything to do with The Rock, and I'm sure my super fanness of The Rock is oozing through every time I have a rant about him. But this is what I would leave this podcast with, this show. Monday Night Raw after WrestleMania, nowhere in sight is The Rock. Do you think that, what would your reaction be?
No. Okay. So yeah, no Rock all the way. I mean, that's difficult because I don't know what the card was, who Roman faced, all the outcomes, all that. I mean, I would, at that point, yeah, I'd be like, all right, F it, it's not happening. And at that point, it would be fresh in our minds as fans of man, come on, this is BS. I would feel some resentment for The Rock, but again, I'm aware of how the psyche of the general public works. We'd forget, or at least be moving on to the next thing quickly. That's just how we are. It's the way the news cycle works. It's the way our brain works. It's just the way it is. So I'd be annoyed for a little while, but again, if he showed up a month later and rock bottom somebody, and I'd be like, all right, well, you could have done that, at WrestleMania, but okay, you're back. Cool, let's go. I mean, so there'd be a period of mourning or of anger, and then, eventually if he just showed up out of nowhere a few months later, I'd be like, all right, well, it's ridiculous he wasn't here before, but he's here now. So, and the thing is, fans would still react like that. No one will convince me that if The Rock doesn't do it, and then he literally shows up the Monday Night Raw after WrestleMania, a week after Mania, and The Rock, the crowd still wouldn't explode. They would. They would still go crazy no matter when he comes back. But I think there'll be some resentment among fans, especially this time around.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And there's nothing much left to say about this, because we could fantasy book it 50 different ways and talk about if and how or when. At this point, it's just up to The Rock if he actually wants to do this and pull the trigger. Yeah. It's literally only up to him. The ball is completely in his court. It's just whether or not he wants to put away 10 dates. Yeah. And I don't I'm not even being facetious. I think that's literally what it's going down to.
That, and of course, yeah, training and all that. I mean, like, even though The Rock's in incredible shape, we all know that. I mean, we've heard it many times. Like, the ring shape's not the same as gym shape and all that kind of thing. And I'm sure he'd have a ring set up for himself wherever he travels to. And that's a time commitment that people don't see, and it's invisible to most fans. But that's honestly where a lot of the commitment's going to come, is his diet and his training on a daily basis. That is what's going to eat up his time. It's not necessarily those 10 dates or that night at WrestleMania. It's the preparation that, again, fans, I think, either forget about or don't think about. That is really what the commitment is on the part of The Rock or anybody coming back for wrestling. So, all right, man, guys, and let me just make this clear. I'm not trying to, and I don't think Anthony's either. We're not trying to hype people up that The Rock's coming back. They said The Rock's coming back. No, we're giving you reasons why he should. And the reasons why, if you're on the side of this argument, that he could be coming back. We're not gung-ho about this. This is just something that is finally like something of significance that we could actually sink our teeth into about what happened on WWE TV. So I wanted to make that point.
Yep. No, I would agree. And at this point, it's just a matter of wait and see and if anything will happen.
Exactly. So, all right, let's wrap things up here and, of course, tell everybody what your latest show was on Retro this past week.
Well, it was actually a release from the Vault, and I believe, was it Edge versus John Cena that you released?
Yes. Yep.
So, I mean, that you're going back. That was back when it was rivalries. So, I mean, I'm sure everyone is well aware of how great that rivalry was between Edge and John Cena. But this week, I've already picked. I had my topic picked for last week, but obviously life got the best of me and I had no time. But I will say that the topic this week will be Shawn Michaels' brief heel turn in the summer of 2005. Ooh. On his way to feud with Hulk Hogan at SummerSlam 2005. And I believe I've covered Hogan versus HBK, that rivalry, but I really kind of want to take a deep dive into Shawn Michaels' brief heel turn, which probably lasted a handful of weeks at best, and just kind of how impactful that was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, I remember that, watching that tag team match, and they won, and then he super kicked him at the end of the show and just stood there. And then, of course, the infamous overselling of the match they actually had, which was comical to watch. If anybody wants to go watch Hogan and HBK, the overselling that HBK did is, you can make it arguments, disrespectful, it's unprofessional, but it's still funny. I mean, so either way, but yeah, guys, check out Rivalries this coming week with Anthony, and of course last week that I posted with Edge and John Cena, which I chose because I selfishly want Edge and John Cena to both cap off their careers at WrestleMania 40 with their history, and that's just my fantasy booking, which is why I did it. But Anthony, thanks so much for joining me, man, and we'll be back in a week, and I don't know if The Rock will be the topic, but it'll be fun.
For sure, man. Looking forward to it.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the WWE Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss a show, or head to WWEpodcast.com. And for all of these shows ad-free, head over to patreon.com/WWE Podcast. Until then, we'll see you next time.